What's going on?
What's going on?
What's going on? What's going on, guys? Mr. Collins here, taking a take 2 here. That first take just wasn't having it. So I'm here with Mr. Loveless again. It's been a while, we're glad to get back into the podcast. And, I think Loveless can back me up on this. Being a teacher, it's very busy work. It's a lot
schedule's crazy.
Schedule's crazy, finding time to do something like a podcast. Sometimes you got to try to fit it into your schedule. But I love doing this. I love having Loveless on. So today, we kind of collaborated on this idea together, coming up with good ideas for a podcast. And I thought, what better than the time machine idea? People always think, if I could go back to any time in history, what time would I go back to? Or people say things like, I was born in the wrong era. I should have been born, in this era. Well, how about we look at a different angle of that? Instead of looking at the best times to go back in time to, let's take a look at the worst times to go back in time to. So our prompt here is, if you were to be kidnapped, thrown in a time machine and taken back to any time in history, what would be the worst times to be taken back to? So we've got a couple topics each here. So you want to start us out, Mr. Loveless?
Yeah. I was reading the other day, and thinking about it, like you watch Pearl Harbor, you watch these different World War II movies, you think, man, what would it be like to be alive in the 40s and 50s? Well, economically it was probably okay because of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
World
War II pulled us out of that Great Depression.
World War II pulled us out. So, but in 1945, in Japan, I didn't even know this, and I'm a history teacher, and I didn't even know this. In 1945, in Japan, they had what was called the Tokyo fire bombings. Now, this is before the big bomb. This is before the...
That was going to be my question, because there's obviously some big fire bombings that happened in, I think it was like August of 45. But you're saying this is before Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yes.
Okay.
It was before the nuclear bomb was dropped. Okay. So what they did was try to just ruin the economy, kill the people out. They would take initially, I guess, like napalm bombs or a version of that, and drop them on the cities and the villages.
And when you're saying they, you're referring
to the U.S.
The United States.
The United States performed bombings on Japan in 1945 called the Tokyo fire bombings. And most of the houses, and they planned this out, most of the houses were like thatch or, wood or something like that. And when they did it, it just decimated everything because it just caught ablaze. And then even after the destruction of the bomb, the fire spread and just destroyed. I don't even know how many people it killed. It was insane.
I mean, that's a crazy thing to even hear because, you look at the ethics of the dropping of the atomic bomb. And, we're not here to get into that, whether it was right or wrong, nothing like that. Just think about the lives, the innocent lives in some cases that were destroyed just from the atomic bombs. And then, Loveless is sitting here telling us that just before that, there was
in
firebombing.
It was in March time frame of 1945. And you had the Doolittle raids. They were in 42. And then you had the Hiroshima and stuff, and that was in 45 also, but that was in August. It was way later.
Yeah.
So basically what it was is these fire bombings were happening. What they weren't effective enough because Japan was like, oh, we ain't giving up. Okay, we'll pull out the big guns is basically what happened, and we dropped a nuke.
Yeah. That was the thing about Japan. They had their kamikaze pilots just crashing in. That played a big part in Pearl Harbor. The just mindset that they were dying for their country, that nationalist mindset. I mean, it was insane. With the Japanese.
It's to the death. I'll do what I told to the death. If you want me to go kill myself, I'll do it. You just tell me to do it.
It was all in the name of the emperor.
It's crazy. Yeah. So, kamikazes.
Just a crazy time to be alive.
Crazy.
You definitely wouldn't want to be blipped just right back to 1945 Tokyo fire bombings because I mean, just Tokyo in general, you probably wouldn't want to live there in 1945.
But now think about it. I mean, even if you weren't sent to Japan, if you even weren't in Japan, just think about the survival rate of the military during 45, and if you would have been sent there at a age where you could serve in the military, you were sent. Pretty much. I mean, you're going.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's enough on that one, I suppose. And then, what did you have for your topic?
So for my topic one, I tried to think to, that exact moment you got teleported back. So I'm not thinking long term here, like, what would your long term, just effect be living here? The exact moment. And the exact moment in history that I picked for topic one that you wouldn't want to be blipped back to was Krakatoa eruption of 1883. So I'm not going to go much into the history of this, but volcanoes, just in general, when they erupt, they are very loud. And the loudest sound to ever be recorded on the planet Earth was in 1883, and it was the eruption of Krakatoa. So this volcano, I believe it was out in the Pacific, it goes off. And if you were within 100 miles of it, dead instantly.
That's
not
crazy.
Death, not
just from
anything
the
like
sound.
that. Just from the sound. The sound killed you. That's how loud
crazy.
it was. Farther out, hit more of the 500-mile range, you were instantly deaf.
That's crazy.
You did not
blew
hear.
your ears out.
Do what?
Just blew your ears
Yeah, blew
out.
your ears out. I mean, you had no chance of hearing again if you were within like 500 miles of this thing. And as far as the long-term effects of this sound, it's said that it circled the earth like, 3 times or something absurd. People from thousands of miles away heard like a faint boom go off.
Yeah.
People in like Britain and Scotland recorded, times of hearing this happen. And to think about just worse times to go back to, it's almost like you just teleported in front of a bomb. The bomb just hit one, and you have no time to react, no time to do anything. You're stuck there. So that was my first topic pick, just because, it would just be a horrible time to be.
Oh, yeah. And what's crazy is they estimated about 120,000 people died.
Wow.
But the recorded actual is around about 35. It was like 34,000 or 36,417, so 37,000 close to.
And late 19th century.
37,000.
Late 19th century is about when we started recording this stuff.
Yeah.
Now we have a record of these explosions or earthquakes. You start getting into the
Keep
Richter
better
scale.
records.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
America starts getting, or at least the world starts getting better at keeping records, and gives us the ability to talk about things like this. So, kind of short and sweet to the point, you would not want to be around Krakatoa in 1883 because that guy was ready to go.
Yeah.
So, I'm actually really interested to hear your second topic because you told me a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of my favorite things to talk about. So, what you got?
Now, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, but I'll go ahead and bring it up. Now, if you was to be teleported to a specific place and time, 14th century London would be horrible.
Yeah.
Because of the Black Plague.
Oh, yeah.
Black Plague and medical. I think you've had one on medical processes.
Oh, yeah. We did medical mishaps.
So
earlier.
the medical field was horrible. Vaccinations were not. They just were nil. There was none.
No.
Nobody had no idea what was going on. Cities were crowded.
Mm-hmm.
Rats are carrying disease everywhere.
Yeah.
And and you look. If you think about it, people that had waste buckets, because there was no indoor bathrooms and stuff. But if you wanted to go to the bathroom in a bucket, where are you throwing it? Out your window onto the street.
Yeah.
So we're just creating this breeding ground for this disease.
Yeah.
But you go ahead and talk about it.
So, kind of the history of the Black Death in Europe, at least. It was already very rampant in Asia. But you got to remember, this is 14th century. There is no text messaging. There is no news. Not a lot of people know that this is going on in Asia, just your average citizens. I believe it was around the year 1346, 47, somewhere in there. A Sicilian ship was trading with Asia, and it came back to Europe with these flea-infested rats that were carrying the Black Death, also called the bubonic plague. A really terrible thing to have. Reason it was called the Black Death is because you would get these huge black sores all over your hands and feet and your body, and it would just ooze pus, and it was just a terrible, terrible thing. The worst thing about it is, just like Mr. Loveless was saying, medicine was not good, and there was not a good understanding of sickness. So you had these plague doctors walking around with the huge noses with spice stuffed into their masks, thinking, well, if I don't smell it, I won't get
happen.
it.
Yeah.
But it did happen, eventually anyways. A lot of times when you caught the Black Death, you didn't know you had it until like a week later. Mm-hmm. So you had already spread it to everybody you knew, and they ran out of graves. There was no place to bury the bodies. So if you look at the list online of top 10 times the world almost ended, it was 14th century Europe.
Oh, yeah.
Because this spread around Asia, Europe, Africa, and basically the whole world population just about came to a demise just because of this sickness, this illness. The only reason it stopped, not because medicine, not because, somebody figured it out, it literally ran out of people to kill. The disease basically killed itself because it killed so many of its hosts. These viruses, they're very parasitic. They got to have a host to survive. And it killed so many people that there just wasn't anybody else left to infect.
Yeah, and you got to think, these rats are in the water system. Mm-hmm. And everybody didn't have plumbing, so everybody used communal water systems.
Yeah.
Well, if that section was contaminated from rats being in it, urine, feces, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're just pumping the water and just drinking it away.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know about boiling it.
Yeah. Didn't have any idea okay, maybe I should boil this first.
Yeah.
And they wonder why they call it the Dark Ages. This is just a terrible time. I mean, any time between the fall of Rome and the year 1453, you would not want to be teleported back to. It just wouldn't have been a time to be alive. So, just a lot of times in history that you would not want to be teleported back to. I think Mr. Loveless here hit the nail on the head with the Black Plague. It wiped out basically everybody it touched. If you look back at our medical mishaps episode, we talked about some ways people back then tried to deal with medicine. You had bloodletting, where people would literally drain all your blood out and put new blood in. Sounds like a great idea on paper, but no,
especially with
it doesn't work.
How they had it sterile.
Yeah, sterile back then was just dusting your hands off and going to work.
Wipe them off or get a little water.
Dust them on the pants.
A little water, dust them off, yeah.
Another way people tried to deal with it was lance boiling. And it's literally what it sounds like. They would hot up this really hot poking stick, and they would just stab it into your big black boils. And a lot of times people would go into shock and die. Yeah. So, a lot of people died just
with hot pokers.
Exactly. I mean, you would think they would apply common sense, but they didn't have any back then because they didn't understand medicine like we do today.
Yeah.
So, super good. You got anything else you want to add as far as the Black Plague goes?
No, I think it makes a great Halloween costume.
I think so too.
Plague doctor, yeah.
I think so. We need to bring that back. See a bunch of plague doctors walking around. Yeah. Maybe I'll do that next year.
You might have to do that.
Might have to. So my last topic that I have for this podcast is the year 536 Common Era. So that's a loaded thing anyways, because we're just the beginnings of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. And I just mentioned that you wouldn't want to go back to any time of the Dark Ages, but why 536 exactly? Kind of similar to my first one, I guess. I took more of a scientific approach this episode. There was a volcano in, I believe it was Iceland, and it erupted. When this volcano erupted in 536, a bunch of people wrote about how awful it was to live. For one, there is no Walmart in 536 Common Era. You can't just go to Walmart and, magically you got lettuce in front of you or potatoes. You had to grow that stuff. You can't grow it without sunlight. There was no more sunlight because there was just this big fog of ash covering Europe from this volcanic eruption. It went as far as Asia, and people in China wrote about it and talked about how, they're starving. It's times of famine because they literally can't grow their food anymore.
Well, you got to think too. I mean, it was called the volcanic winter.
Yeah,
they called it the volcanic winter. It was the coldest time in the last 2,000 years.
Wow.
and you know, it hasn't been that cold ever since 2,000 years. That cold.
And
that
probably
many places because it just blotted out the sun. I mean, there was no sun, no way to heat
there's
Earth.
no way to get
Nothing.
heat
It
or
was just
anything.
that cold.
And that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I would bet that was probably the coldest time aside from an ice age that's ever been on Earth.
It was probably close to an ice age, yeah.
It was probably close to it. No woolly mammoths walking around, or at least that we know of. But
maybe.
Yeah, we weren't there, so we can't know for sure. But
Little snowmen and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, these snowmen were pretty dark and ashy. You know, a lot of ash on the ground.
A lot of dark and ashy, yeah.
It kind of makes you think of a nuclear winter or anything. But, you know, that's all I've got. You know, I've expired my topics. You know, we talked about Krakatoa eruption on my end and another eruption. You know, I didn't purposely do that. I guess I had volcanoes on the mind. And Mr. Loveless here, you know, covered some pretty good topics as well. You got anything else you want to add as far as your topics go?
No, I think I'm good on that. The only thing I would add is if I went back in time, I'd want to travel in a DeLorean.
I got you. You know, I mean,
go in style, man. Like,
or a hot tub, the hot tub time machine.
Yeah,
you can
but
do
then
that
you can't
too.
travel nowhere once you get there.
Yeah, true.
Of course, the DeLorean always broke down. So.
Yeah. Shout out to Back to the Future, greatest trilogy to ever be.
Yeah.
But it feels good to be back in the podcast, you know, swing of things. You know, we've been talking, you know, day to day. You know, we're going to do this day for the podcast, and then something comes up. So, sorry for the late submission. Sorry for not putting the podcasts out. Make sure you're following the TikTok. I do post some content here and there on the LTH Podcast TikTok. I'll try to link that down below. But it's always a pleasure to have Mr. Loveless. We'll go over the boom mic this time.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure having Mr. Loveless. He always brings some pretty awesome knowledge to the table. But as always, guys, keep learning history, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.